Beautiful evening. How you guys doing? Well, my name is Demetra Brown, also known as Astro Einstein, and I am an astrologer. I've been studying astrology for the past 20 years. And tonight is something interesting. I want to focus on death in an astrology chart. A lot of people are fascinated with the idea of death. Some for the wrong reasons, some the right reasons. Either which way, there is an intriguing frame of mind that each person gets when they think about death. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at one of our fallen brothers' natal chart and how, for some apparent reason, the way that they were going to die showed up in their natal chart. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of slack from a lot of astrologers who, like to go against the grain, like to go with the establishment and say that, you shouldn't predict death in a chart. But if it's a part of the cycle of life, then why? Why be afraid of it? There's too much mysticism behind death. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on Kobe Bryant's chart, since, the media, everybody has been, all about Kobe Bryant and, how suddenly he went and, how his daughter passed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how his death, or the way that he was going to die, not the day that he's going to die, but the way that he's going to die, is illustrated in his chart. Now, in esoteric communities, these are called exit points, meaning ways that you decided on leaving this earth before you even came on this earth. Well, it's shown inside Kobe Bryant's chart that he had chose this exit point way before he even got here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use reference, as a matter of fact, to this book called The Rulership Book by Rex Mills. That's pretty good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn you towards my TV. And I'm going to use a way of zooming in so you can be able to see what I'm talking about. Now, Kobe Bryant as a whole, if you look right here, he's a Capricorn rising, according to his time of birth, which is calculated as 5 p.m., okay? Not sure if that's exactly right, but we're going to go with that regardless. Because he does strike me as a Capricorn rising, always serious face, always about business, So it isn't far from what I would have gathered anyway. So when we look at his chart, let me take a very closer look, and I'm going to zoom in as much as I can. And we look at his 8th house. His 8th house has Mercury in it. As you can see, Mercury right here. All right? And Mercury represents short distance traveling. It also represents a lot of different things. But in his situation, it was short distance travel. Okay? That means travel. When you add the 8th house, which is sex, death, regeneration, and in his case, it's death. Okay? Focusing on death. And with Mercury inside of that means, and what I interpret is a form of death through short distance travel because Mercury rules that. Okay. And because it's sitting in the sign of Leo, this represents travel that, with honor. What's more grander than traveling by a helicopter? And not everybody gets a chance to travel by a helicopter. Only the royals, or the royals of the royals, in a sense, travel from one point, A, point B, and stuff like helicopters. So that represents that. Now, when we take a look, we would notice that it forms, see the red line there? It forms a square to Uranus. Now that's about a 9 orb square. Either which way, it's still a square. And it makes a square to Uranus. As you can see, Uranus in the sign of Scorpio. Now Uranus rules aviation. So does the 11th house. And he has the Uranus sitting in the sign of Scorpio, which naturally rules sex, death, regeneration, that sort of thing. He has his Mercury squaring Uranus. This is where it gets a little more complicated. Check this out. Not only does his Mercury squares his Uranus, but it also is opposite his moon in the 5th house. Now you would say, what does that say? Astro, I said, what does that mean? The 5th house rules children. It also rules romances, speculation, all of these things. But in his case, we're going to say it represents children. Now, his moon, or the moon inside somebody's chart, represents the emotional makeup. Something that makes them feel secure, a sense of emotional connectedness. And we all know, based upon their relationship on social media, that Gigi and Kobe Bryant were really, really close. Really close. So that would mean that with that moon being the 5th house and in the sign of Taurus, they had a really stable relationship. He has a really stable relationship with his children. Whenever I see moon in the 5th house, this would indicate to me somebody who has a lot of girl children. But Chiron is the wounded healer. Okay, in conjunct with his moon. That there's an esoteric feeling towards with Kobe Bryant being his Chiron or Chiron being conjunct his moon. And with that 5th house placement being opposite to his Uranus, this would show me that there is some connection with his daughter. You see the square to Uranus? With aviation and death. Okay? What I'm seeing and what I gather from his 8th house, what we talked about earlier, the 8th house, the only planet that's sitting in there is Mercury, being squared to Uranus in the sign of Scorpio, and opposite is moon in the 5th house. Now, this isn't a coincidence. This is not a coincidence. A lot of people be like, you know what? Einstein, you're making it stretch, but who other chart resembles something of that nature? When you think about it, it's right there in front of your face. Now, you could join me while I look at another chart which indicated their way of dying. But we're going to look at that next week. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at one point, the conspiracy theory of how he died. You know, looking at the transits, his progressed chart. But we're just looking at his natal chart. And this is clear indication of some form of death through travel. This could also have meant some sort of respiratory illness because Mercury rules respiratory and breathing. So all these things are connected. When you look at the Mercury in the 8th house, everything that's connected to Mercury in the 8th house can be an exit point for Kobe Bryant. And we all have exit points, whether we have a planet in that house or not. Because the planet that rules the sign that sits on that house is a pure indication of how you're going to leave this earth if there isn't any planets sitting in that house. I know. It's a crazy thing, isn't it? But it is what it is. This is Astro Einstein just pointing out a few things for you when it comes to demystifying death in a natal chart. Thank you.